So much is happening in the UK at the moment. Prime Minister Theresa May has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party, loads of Tories are already vying for her place, and the government is still trying to work out Brexit. With all that going on, it's easy to look past the recent EU elections. However, that will be unwise, as these elections have a significant impact on the future of Brexit, as well as the future of Europe as a whole. In this video, we're going to talk about what happened in the UK, how Brits have voted in the EU elections, and what the results mean for Brexit going forward. We're only going to be looking at the UK's results here, but the rest of the EU obviously also voted. Their opinions can also affect Brexit, because if the rest of the EU gets sick of dealing with the UK, getting a deal could become a whole lot harder. If you want us to explain what the results mean for the rest of the EU, then like this video and comment below and we'll get right onto it. In the election, people across the European Union voted for new MEPs. Those are members of the European Parliament. The European Parliament is one of the major bodies that makes up the EU, and is the only fully elected body in the EU. We explain how the elections work, and what the EU Parliament actually does in another video, linked below, so we won't repeat that again now, but just know that this is an incredibly important election. Okay, so first, let's look at the results of the European parliamentary elections in the UK as a whole. At the time of creation, results for Northern Ireland were yet to be declared, so we'll only be looking at England, Scotland and Wales. Here are the numbers of MEPs that were elected for each of the parties. The Brexit Party earned the most seats, followed by the Liberal Democrats, Labour, the Green Party, the Conservatives, the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru. When you look at how this compares to the party's performance in the last EU elections in 2014, the difference between winners and losers is stark. It's clear to see that the status quo of British politics has been disrupted further still. Both the Brexit Party and Liberal Democrats have seen their vote share soar, becoming the two largest parties, with both Labour and the Conservatives clearly shunned at the poll. The Brexit Party gained the most seats, totalling 29. They had a plurality of seats in 9 of the 11 regions in England, Wales and Scotland. The two regions where they failed to get the most seats were London, where the Liberal Democrats got one more seat than them, and Scotland, where the SNP dominated. This is an undeniably big success for the Brexit Party, who didn't even exist a few months ago. They managed to completely take over from UKIP as the party of Brexiteers, leaving the OG Brexit Party, UKIP, with only 3.3% of the votes, and no seats at all. This is an undeniably impressive result for the Brexit Party, but it doesn't necessarily show a major shift in public opinion. A large percentage of their support has simply been transferred across from UKIP. It's impressive, though unsurprising, that they're able to completely decimate UKIP. But their success generally represents people moving from one party to another, rather than brand new Brexiteer voters. That being said, they didn't just steal votes from UKIP. They also clearly managed to get a large number of Conservative voters to support them instead. We'll discuss this more in a moment, but it's obvious that a lot of Conservative voters are getting sick with the lack of Brexit progress, and have chosen to support the Brexit Party instead. The Brexit Party have definitely sent a real message to the Conservatives. If the Conservatives ignore their Brexiteer supporters and try for a more moderate approach on Brexit, these supporters are likely to go elsewhere, to find another party which better represents their views. This win is a significant step for the party, and yet another warning sign for the Conservatives that their supporters aren't happy, and of course, a victory for the Brexiteers as a whole. However, we shouldn't let the Brexit Party's success completely overshadow the Liberal Democrats' victories. The Lib Dems gained 20.3% of the vote and 16 seats. This is a huge improvement from their 2014 performance, picking up 15 new seats. From a party who looked completely destroyed after the 2015 general election, this re-emergence from the ashes is quite incredible. The Liberal Democrats have been able to achieve this by having a strong and clear message. They don't support Brexit, they want a second referendum, and simply were a party for Remainers. Don't forget that back in 2016, 48% of people voted to remain, so there's a sizable chunk of the UK population who are very receptive to this sort of message. The Liberal Democrats are able to scoop up a huge number of these voters and convert them into 16 MEPs across the country, a significant win for the party. Clearly, the major parties had a terrible night, with their total seat counts dropping significantly, with the Conservatives losing 15 seats and Labour 10. When you combine the performance of the Conservatives and Labour, traditionally the two dominant parties in the UK, they failed to get a combined 25% of the vote in this election. Comparing this to previous European elections, you can see that the number has been steadily declining for some years now. But this sub 25% number is a real low for the big parties. The Conservatives had the worst night imaginable, only retaining 4 of the 19 seats they had in 2014. Everyone thought that the Conservatives would suffer in these European elections, but this result has to be about as bad as it could possibly have been. It's worth remembering that a large percentage of Conservative voters support Brexit, and would be perfectly happy with a no-deal Brexit. Therefore, their supporters are getting anxious to see Brexit actually happen, and are getting tired of these delays and negotiations. They either want a deal to get sorted quickly, or for the UK to just leave without a deal at all. What they don't want is long, protracted negotiations, which make the chances of Brexit never actually happening more and more likely. Labour also got a kicking last night. Although they lost fewer MEPs than the Conservatives, Labour saw their share of votes drop by 11.3%, meaning that they are only able to retain 10 of the 20 seats that they had in 2014. Some say this failure is down to the fact that Labour has been so slow to come up with a real stance on Brexit. Labour's indecision and lack of coherent policy on Brexit allowed the Lib Dems to emerge as the prominent Remainer party. This clearly affected Labour last night. Their lack of clear stance meant that Remainers preferred to support parties which held stronger, clearer views, and Leavers would rather support a clearly pro-Brexit party. Unfortunately, in the UK's current political climate, there isn't a whole lot of room for middle ground, and Labour's performance suffered because of this. Maybe at this point in the video, you're beginning to think that we're reading too much into the election results. Maybe there's some other factor in people's decision making beyond Brexit. After all, it does seem kind of crazy to elect an MEP purely on one issue, when the European Parliament is such an important institution and each party has so many other policies and stances. So to test the correlation, let's take a look at the relationship between how people voted in Leave voting areas and Remain voting areas. So first let's look at the winners from last night, the Brexit Party. When you overlay their performance on a map of how people voted in the 2016 Brexit referendum, you can clearly see that the more Leave voting an area was, the more likely they were to support the Brexit Party. The inverse is also true for the Remain supporting Lib Dems and Greens. For these parties, the more Remain voting an area was, the more likely they were to support the Greens and Lib Dems. The trend even continues to the two major parties. Both struggled in all areas. The Conservatives performed strongest in Leave voting areas, while Labour did the best in Remain voting areas. All of these results that we've been discussing so far have been for England, Wales and Scotland combined, but looking at Scotland on its own tells a very interesting story. When you look at the total number of votes, there was a very clear winner, the SNP, who received 37.8% of the Scottish vote, earning them 3 of the 6 Scottish MEPs. When comparing their results against 2014, their growth hasn't been as substantial as the Brexit Party, but it is still very significant. That's because for the last few weeks, the SNP have renewed calls for a second independence referendum for Scotland. We'll be discussing the idea of Scottish independence in another video released very soon, so keep an eye out for that. So what does all this mean for Brexit going forward? Well, in practical terms, not much. Members of the European Parliament have little, if any, real power in domestic affairs. However, it's clear that there will be an auxiliary impact. As we mentioned in our video on how European elections work in the UK, these elections have, in the past, tended to be second-order protest votes, with people favouring smaller, single-issue parties and generally lower levels of turnout throughout the EU. What it does clearly show you is that the country is still divided and polarised, with people increasingly supporting the most pro-EU and pro-Brexit parties. When you combine together the Brexit and UKIP supporters, you get just under 35% of people voting for a strongly pro-Brexit party. And when you add up the votes of the Lib Dems, Greens, SNP, Change UK and Plaid, you'll find that just under 40% of people voted for a strongly pro-EU party. When you add in Labour and the Tories, you'll find that the broadly pro-Brexit parties got just over 44% of the vote, and the broadly pro-EU parties got around 53%, showing that the country is still far from decided about what kind of Brexit they want, and if they even want one at all. No one's saying that this is a fair proxy for a second referendum result, but it does show that people are still divided. The extremely strong showing from the Brexit Party and Liberal Democrats, together with the pain inflicted on the traditional parties, Labour and the Conservatives, will mostly influence the latter's next steps. For the Tories, it's highly likely that there'll be mounting pressure on MPs and party members to back a clearly Brexiteer candidate, lest they be decimated to the same extent at a general election. A general election that may be necessary to complete Brexit anytime soon. Despite the intentions of some candidates, current parliamentary arithmetic isn't backing a no-deal Brexit, nor is it backing the withdrawal agreement. Only time will tell what will happen next, but with the Conservative Party on the brink of a leadership election, now is the time for them to decide. They want a Prime Minister who will continue to negotiate, or one that will lead them into a no-deal Brexit. The result of this election could push them towards the latter. We'll continue to discuss this issue and everything else related to Brexit in our future videos. Make sure you subscribe to our channel to be notified when those videos come out. We also create exclusive content and articles on other social media. You can find us by searching for TLDR News.